At the Home Depot, we make it easy to turn your to-do list into a done list with our speedy delivery options. Need something in a hurry? We offer next day and even same day delivery on a wide variety of products. The best part is you can order straight from your couch. Our team is ready to help and get your order to you same day if it's placed by 4 p.m. on select products. When shopping online, filter by delivery to see availability options. Delivery at the speed you need, only at the Home Depot. We are back on the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T, and yes, we are light one chair up on our set today. DJ Shockley is traveling with the Georgia Bulldogs for their college football playoff semifinal matchup, or quarterfinal matchup, actually, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's still trying to figure out how these 12
there's too many.
works.
There's too many.
But we won't have Shock today, so it's just going to be me and Arch. Good news is I actually got two guys this week that were on the call. Arch with the Falcons call. I was on for the national radio call. So we were both there. We were able to take in all of the plays of the Falcons' 30-24 loss in overtime to the Washington Commanders. So, Arch, let's go ahead and break this down, because as you and I talked at halftime briefly, this game kind of ended up being like a tale of two halves, right? Like the first half, Atlanta was doing pretty much whatever they wanted, especially in the running game. A lot of credit to the offensive line. I think Bijan Robinson continued to show the Commanders why he's one of the better backs in the league, how many people he made miss. So let's just talk about what you saw in the first half and why Atlanta was able to develop that lead in the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, I thought that the control of the line of scrimmage is certainly worth talking about, Rack. I think that, whenever Bijan gets things going, and he has the ability, we've talked about it multiple times, to make people miss in the backfield or make people miss at that initial point of contact and then get additional yards. And he did some of that in the game. But I thought the offensive line, the tight ends, even the wide receivers did a really pretty good job of getting Washington blocked to provide opportunities, because when Tyler Algier came in, Algier was busting them with run game as well. So the run game was outstanding. I think he ran for right at 100 yards in the first half. Bijan had like 82 yards rushing in the first half. And so you were doing the kind of things that you need to do. Plus, you were being given the opportunity. Your defense was doing a pretty good job of hemming in one of the better players, young players in the league, and Jaden Daniels in the first half. So I thought the complementary football piece of playing really good defense, playing situational defense, they were 1 for 4 on third down in the first half. Now, Atlanta was 0 for 4 on third down, but fortunately you were able to get enough footing and move the football enough to be able to put points on the board. Michael gets a little bit, one of his receivers runs an improper route, or a route he didn't expect. That's what led to the first interception. That gives them a short field. They go in and cash it. I thought the key moment in the first half for me was Penix and the offense coming back on the field after giving up that short field touchdown and the interception to answer. They go 7 plays, 70 yards, and they punch it in the end zone with Bijan Robinson. I thought that was a really cool statement on the road. You and I have both been in that building. We've played in the, you played in that building. I played in the old RFK, but those fans can really get pretty rabid. I thought it was a playoff atmosphere, and I thought them scoring early kind of put you behind the 8 ball a little bit. To be able to answer that touchdown with a 7-play, 70-yard drive and punch it in, it kind of cooled things down a little bit in the building. Right. And they still stayed pretty high, but it gave you a lot of confidence, and I think it was you got punched in the face. You came back and punched them in the face, I just thought there was an equalizer, and at that point we settled into a pretty good game. Yeah,
it showed a lot of poise from the young quarterback and the confidence to come right back from that, because you just never know, right? Primetime matchup, like all the stakes that were on the line. Moving the ball a little bit, then boom, interception, the crowd goes nuts, right? You and I, where we were sitting at our radio location, we're right behind like the lower level of the fans, and they're going nuts. It's probably going through our headsets and everything, right? But I mean, that's what happens when you play on a road. First road start for Michael Penix, so I think it's a great point how he responded after the interception. But I think it's also, as you mentioned, Arch, good to note how the defense, they were getting after Jaden Daniels in the first half as far as sacks goes, and they were able to hem him up in the running game. It was like Washington was trying to throw the football, like keep him in the pocket early. He only ended up breaking one run out, but they really did a good job at one of the more mobile, athletic, dynamic young quarterbacks in this league.
Yeah, they really did a good job with the concept of, and I think you're right, Cliff Kingsbury, their offensive coordinator, He had watched a ton of tape. You could tell that. They came out with that short passing attack. They were going to attack and take what Atlanta was giving them. Atlanta's done a better job over the last several weeks, even since, I guess maybe since the bye week, of taking away those quick, short throws. But I thought Ertz did a really good job. They did a good job of checking down to the backs. And I thought Jaden Daniels stayed pretty disciplined in how he wanted to attack. They ran one. You talked about the one get. They ran zone read one time, and we didn't play it properly, and he bounced out and got about 25 yards. That was right at the end of the first half. And you and I both kind of, you and your situation and me and mine, I told Wes, I said at halftime, we talked about it as the here comes quarterback run. They're going to run the football. And I know you were thinking the exact same thing, and that's what we got in the second half.
Yeah, so we'll kind of switch gears and talk about the second half, because as Atlanta kind of had, after the initial interception that gave up 7 points, Atlanta pretty much had the pulse of the first half. And then the second half came, and there was definitely an adjustment at halftime for Washington, where I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, probably went up to Jaden Daniels and said, all right, young fella, we're going to put this on your shoulders. And we're going to have you do what you do, because he's already showed throughout the course of this season that he can run the football, but he had been hemmed up in the first half, and that was a completely different story. You go to the third quarter, I believe, if my numbers are right, Arch, the Falcons had the ball for 2 minutes and 7 seconds in the third quarter,
that is right.
I believe. So the offense didn't even really have a chance. It was 3 plays for minus a yard, and the Commanders had the football for the entire rest of the third quarter.
Yeah, and you could even add the back or the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
There was a 16-minute span there where they had the ball for 14 of the 16 minutes essentially. So Atlanta just didn't have the football. Now, there's no, you might want to point the finger at the defense, and sure, you need to get off the field. You need to find a way. This was a team, you had limited them, I think, to 1 for 4 on third down. I think they were 5 for 9 on third down in the second half. So they found a way, and it was a lot of Jaden Daniels. And some of it was design run game. Some of it was him getting out impromptu. Some of it was Cliff Kingsbury moving him out of the pocket to give him some run-pass options. So give them credit for making some adjustments to get the quarterback free.
And Arch, it seemed like, to your point, it seemed like there were a few passing plays. Like it was a true passing play, but Daniels got the ball. He looked one direction, and then he was like, I got a seam, I'm taking it, right? It was almost like predetermined in his head that if he didn't have somebody wide open right away, that he was like, I'm just going to go ahead and take care. It was very reminiscent for me of watching Michael Vick, right? Because when I was playing with him, Michael got to those times in the game where he knew we needed a play. And a pass play was called, and he'd look, and then he'd find a seam, and he was gone, right? And that's where, like, I was watching Jaden Daniels, and it was very eerie to see Mike Vick, Lamar Jackson, because that's the type of ability that he shows. Not only is it the speed, but it's slippery. Like, he rarely gets hit, Arch. Like, he finds a way to make people miss.
He's a dynamic player, and he's one of the bright stars that we're going to get a chance to watch over the next several years, hopefully. Hopefully he can stay healthy and stay out of injury for Washington's sake, and we'll be able to watch him as fans of football to be able to watch this kid play. But he certainly understood the moment. And I think that give Washington credit for teeing him up and saying, hey, listen, you need to, as you said, go do what you do. I thought Atlanta got caught in a couple situations. We like to use a lot of 5-man pressures. We'll bring Jaden Daniels up. In fact, Jaden makes a play because of the look. You confuse the young quarterback, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to mix looks up. We talked about it last week on the podcast. What do you do with this kid? Well, you got to mix the looks up, and as it turns out, you had a mush rush, you had a hug situation with your linebacker in the left B gap. Then he drops out into coverage and he gets the interception. So you did some of the things you needed to do to help confuse him a little bit, but ultimately it got down to his raw athleticism. He went and got things done.
So tough to win sometimes in the National Football League when you give up 216 yards rushing, as the Falcons did. And, of course, Jaden Daniels, 16 carries, 127 yards, and if my math is right, about 103 in the second half.
Yeah, it was his first 100-yard game of his career rush in the football. If you go back and you look the week before, he did the same thing to Philly. And then Philly's defense had no answer for him. Our answer had to be offensively, and as it turned out, that's what we did. We came back offensively to answer what Jaden Daniels was doing.
So just second half time of possession, by the way, I went and looked at it. Washington, essentially, I rounded my numbers here, 21 minutes, Atlanta 9 minutes in the second half. Commanders had 17 more offensive plays in the second half than Atlanta did. But all that being said, Arch, let's kind of go back to the final drive where Atlanta gets the ball and they drive the length of the field. And I'm going to kind of fast forward all the way down, and if you need to rewind a little bit, go ahead. But they get first and goal at the 5, and an errant wildcat snap goes over the top of Bijan Robinson's head. And I'm sure, I don't know what your reaction was in the booth, but it was just like, oh my gosh. Like, you're thinking first and goal at the 5, Bijan is in the wildcat. Like, this could be one run play, and he's in the end zone. And then it was disaster, or shall we say near disaster, because they end up losing, was it 26 yards on the play, or was it on the 26-yard line?
I think they lost 21 yards.
Yeah, so it ended up being on the 26-yard line. And then I want you to kind of take us through the young quarterback in a pivotal game, his first road start, how he overcomes that to not only get them back in scoring territory to actually punch the ball into the end zone.
Well, he's got to have a resolve in his mind to where, okay, I'm probably not going to get a 25-yard throw here for a touchdown. It's still goal to go, remember. So you're at the 26-yard line or wherever it was, and it's second and goal now. So now my mindset, and I'm sure Zach's talking in his ear, say, let's chip away at this. And I actually said it on the broadcast. Okay, Mike can't, if he sees a shot, take it, but I've got to think about chipping away, get myself back to a reasonable chance to throw the ball in the end zone on potentially fourth down, which is what it's going to be, because you got to go. He finds London along the sidelines, and I like to rewind back. You mentioned rewind back. Go back. Remember, he converted fourth down twice in this game, in this drive. He hits London on a play on a bench route on fourth down. I think I want to say 4th and 9, 4th and 10, somewhere in that neighborhood, on the left sideline. And if you go back and look at it, he's got early pressure in his face. London's running the deep outcut, bench route, comeback, whatever you want to call it. And Penix lets the ball go way before London comes out of the break. He threw it a little bit early he put a little bit of touch and air on it. And when London came out, the ball hit him right in the face. He stepped out of bounds for the first down. Or actually, London made a guy miss, got back up the field, and got the ball down to somewhere around the 15-yard line. Then Ray ran the jet sweep to get it inside the 5. Now we fast forward back up to where you're talking about. So that, just remember those plays that he made prior to getting in position. But then he hits London along the sidelines. Now you're third and goal. You miss a shot, and now all of a sudden it's fourth down. And
game's on the line.
This is it. And you dial up. They play Tampa 2, and Kyle Pitts, of all people. Kyle, a lot of fans I know are out there questioning, where's Kyle Pitts? Why has he not been more involved? Well, Kyle came up big at one of the biggest moments. You know, I mean, he wins against Tampa 2. He's got an underneath defender coming from the inside that's going to try to wall him from getting into the middle of the field. Got 2 deep safeties. And so me, as a quarterback, I got to be pinpoint with the throw. I thought he did a really good job of trusting the fact that the defender had his back to him. So he shot the ball to the inside, pulled him away from the safety, you know, kind of gambling a little bit that the defender wouldn't get his head around, and put the ball down around the knee level, and Kyle went and got it. Now, it's a laser beam throw. It's a big-time throw. You can go back to the greats of the game, and it's as good as any throw you're going to make in his career. You go back, hopefully we're going to look at a 15-year career of Michael Penix, and this throw right here might be a defining throw of his career that's going to lead us to some great stuff, but he won't make a better throw than he made in this one.
Arch, it's almost a travesty that they came up short in this game, because you look back at that throw, and number one, for him to have the guts to throw that ball, and number two, the location, the zip, and like where he put the ball, like when they showed the replay, because you and I we were at in that stadium, right? The radio booth locations at Washington are not very good.
Yeah,
okay? Arch is going to be a little bit more honest than me. So that action was all the way on the other end of the field of us, so we don't necessarily have the greatest vantage point on it. But when they showed the replay and I saw the location of that throw, I was like, oh my goodness, that is a special throw, location in the moment too. Like, people don't understand the moment. Like, if he gets nervous and that ball ends up hitting the ground before it even gets to Kyle Pitts, you see that he's not ready for the moment.
Yeah.
But it was almost just like Michael Penix was like, dude, this is a CFP national title game. I got this.
Yeah.
Right? And he just throws a laser into the hands of Kyle Pitts, and they end up tying up the game.
Yeah,
so,
and give Kyle credit, too. Kyle had to win. He's got a defender running from inside out that's trying to wall him. Tampa 2 is most I think fans know, 2 deep coverage is 2 safeties playing halves of the field, and then you're playing 5 under zone or 5 under man. In Tampa 2, a lot of times it's zone, but you'll man up the vertical route that's coming from the slot. Mm-hmm. And so he's got a guy trying to wall him from getting inside. Kyle wins over the top enough to give Penix the angle to throw the ball in there. Penix pulls him away from the safety. Now think about all the things that are happening here. Then he locates the football, as Rack's talking about, down and away from the defender, and the defender's on his back. Now Kyle makes the grab, and there's a defender draped all over him. So as good a throw as it was, and give Penix a tremendous amount of credit, you're rightly so, give Kyle a ton of credit because he hadn't caught a lot of balls. He caught 3 balls prior to. I think he had 1 that was nullified because of a penalty. But Kyle makes a huge play in a huge moment, so give the big tight end some credit as well.
You mentioned Tampa 2, cover 2. Just for our listeners and our viewers, just so you understand, like in a cover 2, you have those 2 safeties. Generally for an offense, the biggest opportunity you have is down the middle of the field. But the Tampa 2 adjustment drops a linebacker, whether it's an outside or traditionally a middle linebacker, deep in the middle of the field to try to take that away.
He's going to run. He's going to run. They're going to pick a vertical. He's going to run with a vertical. He's not going to drop in a zone. He's going to find the vertical and run with him to try to wall him from getting in there. And that all happened. There's no question about it.
So then we go to the overtime period. Atlanta loses the coin toss, so Washington takes the football. And much like it was in the second half, I mean, it was just Jaden Daniels kind of taking over in overtime. And again, you can rewind if you want, all the way to the point to where late in that drive, Dan Quinn ended up calling a timeout. Let the play clock go all the way down, call a timeout because his quarterback was absolutely exhausted because he had run so much on that drive. He was kind of bent over down on the ground trying to catch his breath. Thought it was a really smart coaching move, not only to call the timeout, but to let the play clock go all the way down. So give him, call it 39 seconds, 38 seconds, plus the timeout to kind of catch his breath. But it was more or less Atlanta just didn't have the answer for what he was able to do, and then he ends up finding Zach Ertz, the trusty veteran tight end, for the touchdown.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job of not letting him beat them on the ground. Now, he got them down there. There's no question. They ran quarterback sweep. They ran quarterback counter. They have a zone read in there where you actually snuffed out the zone read and tackled him for, I think, a yard loss or maybe a no gain. You did a really good job there. And so ultimately he scrambles, gets to about the 3, and then Justin Simmons comes up and drops the hammer on him and knocks him to the ground. So now on third down, you got a chance to potentially force them to either make a decision if they're going to kick a field goal or go for it. And they do a really good job with their look. They had a stack look to the left side, and Atlanta's trying to match, and Ertz releases to the flat. Alford, obviously jumps him because you can't give away that quick flat throw or it's going to be a touchdown, and then Ertz busts it back to the inside, and it's just a quick throw to Ertz on that little angle route. It was a good design. It was a really good play in that situation, and so give them credit. Now, if we can, we should go back probably and revisit right at the end of the regulation and give the defense a ton. This is a defense that had been on the field the entire second half. Rack's talked about it. He documented the time. 21 minutes practically they were on the field for the second half of 30 minutes, okay? You come back out after Penix just drove your team the length of the field to tie the game. They've got the ball with about, I think it was a minute 19 left. More than enough time. They've got a big kicker, big-legged kicker.
Yep.
And you go in and you get 3 and out. You go in and you put pressure on the quarterback. Now, you had to throw to Zaccheaus over the middle. I thought Hughes is in a pretty good spot. Maybe got in his vision a little bit. Zaccheaus doesn't pull in the catch on third down. But you go 3 and out defensively. You had just been, steamrolled in the second half or been on the field the entire time. You come in and get a 3 and out. What an outstanding job by Jimmy Lake's crew to go out there and get the ball back for their young quarterback. And then obviously, Penix makes a great throw to Mooney along the sideline. Mooney doesn't get out of bounds. And so then it becomes a lot of what people are talking about. Okay, do you burn a timeout there? There's a lot of different thought process, okay? Quinn and Joe Witt are well known for exotic blitzes and looks. There was an opportunity to rush to the line of scrimmage and go for it in that situation, not take the timeout. And Michael actually has Mooney open on the sideline and just missed him. And that happens in games. You're gonna miss some shots. So then there comes the conversation: should you burn a timeout and all that kind of stuff? There's a lot of different things going on. You got to remember, Raheem coached with Joe Witt and with Dan Quinn. He knows what those guys are going to do. In fact, the very next play or 2 plays later, they come with a 0 blitz on him. Now, you get the penalty that gives you an opportunity to maybe potentially try a long field goal, but there's a lot going into it. So it's not just, hey, take a time out there. That's not – there's a thought process. What's easier for the young quarterback? To see a conventional 4-man pass rush in a hurry-up situation, or do you call timeout and allow them to maybe put together something exotic that gets them a sack or confuses the young quarterback where he throws it to the other team? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on there as far as conversation. And you can argue both sides, and I'm not trying to defend one or the other, but there's a lot going on. So don't think that it's just naturally you call a timeout there. That there's a lot more thought process going on to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest conversations that came out of the game. And I know you got a chance to talk to Coach Morris and everything. And was there any other explanation behind what his thought process was there? Because he was kind of taking a lot of flack for not only the first half, but the second half not calling the timeouts.
Yeah, and I thought the first half played out. You bled the clock in the first half, and it's third down. Remember, we get a ball thrown over the middle, it almost gets picked off. And then you get to a third down, and he's potentially got a shot to London in the left corner and just, maybe rushed it a little bit, didn't put enough air on it, whatever, missed him, and you kick the field goal. In the second half, in the situation, he's talking about, okay, what would be best? And remember, this is happening in real time now. We're not talking about, I've got 10 minutes to figure this out. I've got a few seconds to figure out, okay, we're going to go. Should we rush the line of scrimmage? Should we burn a timeout? And so the conversation was, and remember, they practiced their 2-minute out here. Now, was the 2-minute a little bit slower than they would have liked? Yes. I think that their operation to get to the line of scrimmage, get the play called, and get it out, maybe a little bit slower than they had hoped. I think that 31 seconds was on the clock when Mooney caught the football. They got the ball snapped somewhere in that 17-second range, somewhere in that neighborhood. But he's got the shot. He's got the shot. He's got Mooney there, just maybe rushed it a little bit and missed the throw. But his thought process was, okay, do I give him a conventional 4-man pass rush and them kind of reeling defensively after we just completed a pass and get a vanilla look, or do I call timeout and now give Joe Witt and Dan Quinn the opportunity to come with something that we haven't seen yet, or come with something that the young quarterback hasn't seen? And so he decided to go with the conventional 4-man look and give him a chance to make a play. And in all actuality, the play is there, and it just didn't come out.
Yeah.
But remember, you got to go back and remember this team has been really good late in the games. Okay, you won a game against Philly late in the game, went the length of the field to win the game. You went the length of the field to get Younghoe Koo in position to beat New Orleans. You had unbelievable late success against Tampa. There's been a lot of successes late in football games. You're going to fail sometimes late in games. Decision-making or where a throw goes or what happens in a game, that's going to happen in games throughout your year. We've played in 11 one-score games, okay? So you're going to have a lot of these opportunities, and you've had a lot more successes than you have failures. I know this one hurts for the fans because this had the playoffs on the line. Yeah. But I hope that gives a little bit of perspective as to what was going on there. And the coach is going to say, hey, it was on me. I made the decision. I'll take the blame or whatever. But there was a lot more thought processing going into it than just taking a timeout or whatever. Yeah,
and Arch, you and I have been in many of those meetings after the fact where you actually dive into what was the play call and what was the situation, what was the thought process of the coaching staff. And sometimes for a fan, it's easy to just point the finger and say, why didn't that happen? But until you actually get inside the nuts and bolts of it, you don't actually know what the thought process was going on between the coaching staff in the headsets and everything. So unfortunately, Atlanta ends up coming up short. You mentioned Michael Penix. I think there's a lot of really, really good things from him. He did end up missing, in my opinion, Arch, probably 5 to 6 throws in the game that I thought could have been really big. And I think those are plays that maybe next year, after he gets 7, 12, 15 games under his belt that he feels a lot more confident, and he just hits those right in stride. But there was a couple of big plays I felt like were missed, just maybe because he's not quite up to speed, chemistry, timing, and all those things.
Yeah, and he might have rushed himself a little bit. It's settling back into game mode, those kind of things. But he may hit some next week against Carolina. I mean, this guy's a quick study. I thought he was very calm. I had a chance to talk to him post-game. Very calm and collected. He was disappointed, as you can imagine, that he wasn't able to get the W. But I think that the sky's the limit, guys. We've got a young quarterback that you should be excited about. I think he's got young talent around him you should be excited about. And we'll probably see it on display this next weekend against Carolina.
Yeah, so speaking of which, unfortunately with the loss, Atlanta loses control of their own destiny to get into the postseason with the win of Tampa this past Sunday. Lopsided win over Carolina, mind you. They ended up beating the 48-14. So now the Atlanta Falcons obviously have to win this week, and then they got to hope that Tampa loses.
That means pulling for the Saints, which I liken pulling the Saints. It would be like, okay, your mom comes in, and so you say, Mom, what are we having for dinner tonight? We're having liver tonight.
And then you have to look forward to it.
Yeah, you go, liver? I don't want. Now, maybe some of you out there love liver. I personally did not. When my mom would do that once a month for us and do the liver thing, and I had to douse it in ketchup. I know maybe we can douse the Saints in ketchup, and maybe they can get a win for us. But pulling for the Saints is like mom serving liver for dinner.
One of the very few times that this organization is pulling for the New Orleans Saints to pull out a big-time win. But, sometimes those things happen. I don't think a lot of people expected Dallas was going to beat Tampa a couple of weeks ago, so you just never know. But Arch, to your point, they can't really worry about that.
Yeah.
All they got to worry about is Carolina. Carolina definitely struggling this year, 4-12 on the season, 1-4 in the NFC South. However, maybe feeling a little bit more confident. They do have Bryce Young back at quarterback. He's been playing better than he did the first few games of the year. So let's kind of dive into this matchup. Of course, Atlanta's already played him one time. What's going to have to happen in this game? Kind of flushing last week out, not thinking about what's going to happen with Tampa, and just going out as professionals and trying to win the game, win the task at hand that's in front of you.
Yeah, it's a great point, Rack, and probably the most difficult thing will be coming in over the last couple of days, coming in on Wednesday. Whenever you see this podcast, we're recording on a Tuesday here, but you mentioned the keyword professional. There's a lot of conversation when a team loses in college. Oh, can they be up and ready for the next game? Well, that's part of the process. You're being paid to play. There's no question about that, but there's a passion that you're going to play as a pro the next week. And so Atlanta's got to rally a little bit here. They're going to have to pick themselves up. There was a lot of disappointed people coming out of that building in Washington on Sunday night. I can tell you that because I got a chance to talk to a number of them. Obviously, I came back on the plane with them. A lot of disappointment. Wasn't a lot of chatter. Wasn't a lot. They realized an opportunity lost there, but they're going to have to regroup and pick themselves up. Raheem and his staff are very good about that, but it'll be a lot on the players to get ready for Carolina because Carolina's going to want to come in. They want their season end right. What you do want to do if you don't get to play in the postseason, you and I both were in situations where you want to go out with a good taste in your mouth. You want to go win a football game, and that's what you take into the offseason. So both teams are going to want to do that. But if Atlanta plays their kind of game, this is a game they should win.
Yeah, you made a great point, and it's like a lot of, again, fans out there, they want to talk about, well, what does X, Y, and Z team have to play for? And I think the argument's still there for Atlanta. They've got plenty to play for because they don't know what's going to happen in the other game. But never in my career, Arch, did I get to like the final two games of the season and think like, oh, like the offseason's coming. Like, what's my offseason plans look like? Because every opportunity you get on a Sunday or a Monday or whatever it ends up being is an opportunity where you're on tape and somebody's evaluating you, whether it's your team or one of the other 31 teams around the league. And if you want to have a long-standing career in this league, what you got to remember is like, I'm a special teams player, right? There is a group of players that are at the top level that if they have crappy games, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a lot of players, not just a little bit. Like there's a lot of players that when you play a crappy game and the coaching staff and the front office puts on that tape and they watch, they start thinking, can we get somebody else that can do that same thing? that can do better than what that guy does, because that's what their job is. Every single offseason to try to find a way to get their team better. And how does that happen? Generally by replacing somebody that was on the team. So, professional, your job is to go out this weekend for the Atlanta Falcons and play your face off against Carolina Panthers to come away with the win, and then you just never know what's going to happen. So what do you think, coming off of the loss, are going to be a couple of the keys for Atlanta to get that victory this weekend?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you're saying, think about this. Derek Rackley was one of the better deep snappers in the game, okay? Rack would go down a lot of times and get tackles in games on punt coverage and things. But to win a game, the operation between snapper, holder, and kicker are paramount. Those things happen 1.3, 1.4 seconds is what happens there, that operation to make that happen. Okay, so there's 32 jobs. This guy, think about how specialized that is. When you think around the National Football League, there are 32 jobs that Rack had. 32. What other profession out there has just 32 spots? Mm-hmm. And so if he snaps one over the punter's head or snaps one in the ground where the holder can't get it down and we lose it, yeah, they're going to go try to find somebody else. I mean, think about how fine a line that is. So the pride factor of showing up and being a professional, but also survival. You want to be in the league. You're going to do your job at the highest level. Forget about it being the last game of the year.
Yeah.
Now, getting to Carolina real quickly. Carolina lost Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard's really had a great year for him. He's over 1,000 yards rushing. In fact, in their game 2 weeks ago, their big win over Arizona, he rushed for 150 yards in the game, got banged up, and is out. So that's a big hole for them to try to fill. Now they're going to try to do it by a running back guy committee. Blackshear's the guy that's been carrying the football for them some. They've leaned a little bit more on their young quarterback in Bryce Young. And Bryce played better this year since he's come back after Andy Dalton kind of took over for him after the first game of the year. Bryce has gotten back on the field, and he's played better in games. In fact, like I said 2 weeks ago, Arizona was in the hunt to be in the playoffs, and they knocked him out. Mm-hmm. He did a really good job playing that game. Now, they got thumped last weekend by Tampa, and I don't know if there's a hotter team in the league than the Tampa Bay Bucks. In fact, get ready. Tampa may make a run. If they win this game against the Saints, they may make a run in the playoffs, and you may see them dancing on Super Bowl Sunday the way they're playing. But for Carolina, this is a team that is going to, remember, they're going to be able to roll the dice. They can do kind of anything. This is where you get that wounded animal scenario where you don't know what you're going to get out of them. There'll be gadget plays. There'll be blitzes you haven't seen on tape. They're going to do anything they can to get after the young quarterback. But I think if Atlanta just goes, the key is go do what you do. Come off the ball, run it, mash them in the run game, make them play physical up front, and then Penix is going to be able to touch them down the field and make some plays. Defensively, you're not going to have to worry about so much about the quarterback running around. Right. You're going to be able to get – this is a defense that has 3+ sacks in 5 consecutive games. No one else in the National Football League has done that. You went from having 9 sacks in what, week 10, Rack? Yeah. You got 31 sacks now. That's still near the bottom of the league because you got off to such a slow start. But you're at the top of the league in the last 5 games. You had 5 sacks this weekend against a really good quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Come get yours. Go eat, if you will, on defense.
Go eat. Shock, what do you think, by the way?
Dogs.
Had to give him a little bit of love. Of course,
dogs.
DJ Shockley's not here. He is with the Georgia Bulldogs as they get ready for their college football.
Wait a minute. I want to hear what do you have to say about the Carolina game?
Yeah, my thing is just going to be get off the field on third down. Okay. And again, it's sometimes it's a continuation of the week before, but you're right. We're not going to face nowhere near the animal running the football at the quarterback position in Bryce Young as they did last week in Jaden Daniels. But to me, it's just the idea of the defense getting off the field, because I felt like that second half they were winded. Like they were on the field a long time and they had to have been exhausted. There was a couple of plays, Arch, where you saw Atlanta like trying to substitute an entire defensive line, right? And they had to because the guys were on the field for so long.
Tell me your thoughts on we didn't tackle well in the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you contribute? That's something you had to do on special teams to run down, tackle guys in space and stuff. Do we contribute that to potentially the fatigue you're talking about?
I think that's one thing, definitely. Again, not to necessarily single out. There was a couple missed tackles by A.J. Terrell where he just kind of threw his shoulder and didn't wrap up. Like, it just goes back to fundamentals and basics, right? Like, with ball carriers in the National Football League, rarely, like, sometimes a defensive back or a safety can go down with his shoulder on a tight end and get him at the thigh, and you're going to knock him down. Sometimes they're going to run through that. But if it's a running back or a really slippery quarterback, that if you don't wrap up, you don't bring your arms, like, they're going to find a way to run through that. I mean, you could ask the guy from Washington when he ran into Bijan Robinson's thigh in that game in the first half, right? Like, it doesn't feel too good, right? So form, mechanics, fundamentals, like, it's all the simple stuff. It goes back to that.
It goes away when you get fatigued.
When you get tired, right? Like, when you get tired, you're just thinking, oh my gosh, how do I survive on this play? I got to get him down on the ground, and you don't end up driving your legs. You don't end up wrapping up with your arms. Your hat placement is not at the right place of the ball carrier. You don't bring your shoulder. Like, all those little things that you talk about in OTAs, in mini camps, in training camp, but when you get into week 17 of the season, you've been on the field for 13 plays. Sometimes it's hard to go back to all those basics and fundamentals.
Such a
but it has
point.
to be there.
By the way, real quickly, you mentioned A.J. Terrell, and there were a number of missed tackles, I thought, in the game, and some of it had to do certainly with fatigue. Some of it had to do with what Rack's talking about in your fundamentals, and hopefully they'll get back to that. A.J. Terrell was on Terry McLaurin, I think, 32 snaps in this game. Terry McLaurin, if you go back, you look at the numbers, you don't know who he is. He's one of the elite receivers in the league. He's over 1,000 yards, has been for the last several seasons. He has had a monster year with Jaden Daniels this year. In fact, gotten back to being the guy who he is. He was on him for 32 snaps. Terry McLaurin had one reception for 7 yards in the game.
Shut him down.
So if you want to talk about what is A.J. Terrell and is he a shutdown corner, go look at that tape, because A.J. Terrell completely locked down one of the best receivers in the league. Good job, A.J.
There was a couple of times where my play-by-play guy, Tom McCarthy, was saying, what does Washington need to do? And I said, they got to find a way to get the ball in the hands of Terry McLaurin.
Well, the crowd was chanting, Terry, and they couldn't get him the football.
And A.J. said, no, it's not happening. So credit to him. He has been one of the better lockdown corners in the league, and I'm happy for him. Listen, I kind of picked on him a little bit when it comes to the tackling. I'm sure A.J. will look at the same plays on tape, and he'll be as critical as himself, because that's what pros do. But he did an outstanding job slowing down McLaurin, who is off to a great start in his career, as you mentioned, another 1,000-yard season, but not in that game against the Falcons. So Atlanta's going to be back at home this weekend in Week 18, 17th game of the season, to face the Carolina Panthers with the hope of getting into the postseason, but it's not all in their hands. Fall short to the Commanders, 30-24 on Sunday Night Football in overtime. On behalf of Dave Archer and kind of DJ Shockley, we're here. You're with us in spirit, Shock. We hope the Bulldogs do great in their playoff matchup, and we will see you back here next week. This has been the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We'll be back to wrap up Week 18 in the NFL next week.
Go Saints. Oh, man, I just kind of threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Liver.